Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, how's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything is good on this end. Um, Here we are coming into the springtime. Can't believe it's 2026, like I've said before. Here in Florida, we're coming around, coming on the downhill of a pretty cold winter. One of those deals, like I said, And then in the summer, I'll be like, oh my God, it's so cool, it's so hot. I can't wait for the winter. But anyway, yeah. Um, let's how's this? Let's be a realist compared to the rest of the Northeast, which is like, what do they have, those snow cyclone bombs, whatever they are? Yeah, I know I'm lucky, so I'm just being a weather wimp. But outside of that, everything is good. But today's show is going to be about what they call either stigmatized properties, not necessarily haunted properties, even though sometimes, especially with these older properties, they end up getting that reputation. We're talking here stigmatized properties because a horrible crime has been committed. Um, and contrary to what everybody thinks, because people don't realize, one thing is to say, well, I'm going to take a tour of that place, or I'm going to drive by that place, or I'm going to do a selfie by that place, versus living there. All right. I'm going to say, you know what? Some houses that just have a haunted reputation do better than properties that are stigmatized because of a murder or something dark happening inside the house. One person, several people. And even if years pass, especially if it had to do something with somebody that was well known, because God knows people die or killed, murdered inside homes all the time. Of course, once there's notoriety attached to the person, the perpetrator, and it makes the papers, 20 years can go by and people are going to still remember it. And even if people sometimes buy some of these properties as an investment because they get them on the cheap to begin with, especially if they buy them right after the crime, then even though in some cases, they remodel them and they do this and they do that to them, it's not as easy as you may think to get rid of them because there's still that stigma attached to it. So I'm going to go over, these are recent cases. When I say recent, I'm going to say that they occurred maybe in the last 30 years, 30, 40 years up to modern times, and what's happened with these properties as far as the crime itself and what I call the aftermath. The aftermath sometimes even after even the perpetrator, if the person's known, has, gone, you know, gone to jail, gone to prison. And sometimes not. Remember, not everything is solved. Okay. Now the first case that we're going to look at, the first story really, this is very recent, and this involves what they call the Idaho 4, right? The house is located on 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. And this is where four University of Idaho students named Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Goncalves, They were all fatally stabbed on November 13th, 2022. This was barely 3 years ago. It was demolished. The house there that we're talking about was demolished on December 28th, 2023, for those of you that are watching the video version of this. Now, the University of Idaho made a decision to tear down the property, citing the need to support community healing and remove a grim reminder of the tragedy. The house had been boarded up and fenced off since the murders and was donated to the university by its private owner in the spring of 2023. Despite objections from some victims' families, particularly the Goncalves and Kernodle families, who argued the site held critical evidentiary value, the demolition proceeded. Both the prosecution and defense teams had previously been granted access to the home for documentation, including 3D scans, photographs, and measurements. Authorities confirmed that no essential evidence would be lost, and a jury would not be allowed to visit the site due to its deteriorated condition. I don't understand how it could be deteriorated. Honestly, I don't. I thought this was student housing, and this happened 3 years ago. And I'm curious to find out why these um, the two, the Goncalves and Kernodle families had objections. Normally, because there is somebody that was arrested. As a matter of fact, you'll see he's already been convicted um, for the crime. As in, like, what other evidence did they think was going to disappear with that house? But let's keep going. The Idaho 4, okay, this is what it's be referred to. Um, they were uh, it at the beginning, people couldn't understand, and you'll see what I mean. That there was a couple of other students in that house that supposedly did not hear anything. And this is not the first time that I've run across this information where there's some type of crime and either other people in the house or the hotel or even next door don't hear anything. One of the examples was, I mean, I've heard in different stories, but I'm going to give a well-known one. Amityville case prior to the Amityville horror kind of deal, where the DeFeo family was all killed. Supposedly, this was a residential area and nobody heard, what was it, 6 shots go off in the middle of the night? So again, we don't know really, was there something that they were expecting besides what had come up? Anyway, Brian Kohlberger, a 30-year-old criminology PhD student at Washington State University, was arrested in December 2022 and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. On July 2nd, 2025, Kohlberger pleaded guilty to all charges as part of a plea deal avoiding the death penalty. He was sentenced on July 23rd, 2025 to 4 consecutive life sentences without parole and an additional 10 years for the burglary charge. Autopsy reports revealed the victims suffered a total of over 150 stab wounds. Kaylee Goncalves, at least 38 stab wounds, some defensive. Madison Mogan, 28 stab wounds. Xana Kernodle, 67 stab wounds, many defensive, indicating she fought back. And Ethan Chapin, 17 stab wounds, likely asleep when attacked. Investigators determined the attack likely took between 2 minutes and 6 seconds to 3 minutes and 45 seconds based on timed runs through the house. Key evidence included DNA from a knife sheath found in the home and in the name, cell phones records, and surveillance footage at Kohlberger's white Hyundai Elantra near the scene. The victims' families have expressed mixed reaction, with some criticizing the plea deal as, quote, a hurried effort to close the case, end quote, and a secretive deal that denied them closure and answers. Again, and I haven't gone into that far into this case. I mean, I can understand if what they wanted was the death penalty. I can understand that. Where maybe they're thinking, we don't want him to spend the rest of his life, yeah, in prison, but alive. Or what's the closure and answers that they're talking about? I'm going to come up to what part of it might be, but let's keep going. Crime, which is this, the following. Brian Koberger has never publicly explained his motive for the murders. Despite pleading guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary, Koberger has remained silent about why he carried out the attack. He did not speak during his sentencing hearing, and prosecutors did not require him to provide a motive as part of the plea deal. While forensic psychologist Dr. Gary Brucato has proposed a theory based on autopsy findings, suggesting Koberger may have been acting out a, quote, targeted psychosexual fantasy, end quote, aimed at Madison Mogen. This interpretation is not confirmed by investigators and has not been presented as official evidence. Investigators and prosecutors have stated they have found no connection between Koberger and the victims, and no motive has been established. As of now, the reason behind the attack remains unknown. Again, you usually hear these murders where there's multiple stab wounds and it's the stabbing and up close, and that he went in there. It's like that there's some type of some type of relationship. How's that? At least with one person in there. But based on what they're writing, there wasn't. But how he became fixated on one of them or all of them. But let's go with the theory that really one of them was the one he wanted. Okay, that he was willing to break into a house and willing to kill, because that tells you that something there is, I mean, makes you, and I don't know again if and it's very difficult if he's not saying I was motivated by this, unless they find, was he stalking them, or how long had be maybe something caught his eye about one or all of them. All right, investigators um, all right, investigators have long suspected that Brian Koberger did not plan to kill 4 people that night. Evidence suggests he went directly to the third-floor bedroom, fueling speculation that either Mogen or Goncalves was his intended target. Now, as far as red flags about his behavior, peer and faculty concerns. There we go. Koberger, a criminology PhD student at Washington State University, was described by peers as rude, condescending, especially toward women, and was labeled a potential incel and possible future rapist. Faculty expressed concerns, with one stating, "Mark my word, I work with predators. We will hear his harassing, stalking, and sexually abusing his students." All right, then see, there you go. Inappropriate conduct. Over a dozen complaints were filed against Koberger for inappropriate behavior. A professor once escorted a female student to her car due to concerns about his conduct. Academic focus. His research focused on sexually motivated burglars. Talk about confession through projection. And he expressed interest in the, quote, the emotions of what it felt like when committing a crime, and how offenders might avoid getting caught, end quote. I'm telling you. All right, now what happens to this neighborhood? All right, remember this, by the way, this Moscow, Idaho, this is a small little town. I believe it's got 25,000 people. It's a university town. Okay, more than 2 years after 4 Idaho victims were murdered, all right, an investment company started buying up properties adjacent to the crime scene. Records obtained by Realtor.com revealed that 3 days after the slayings, a company called Eagle Investment Group LLC bought a home on Taylor Street located less than 500 feet from the then still active crime scene. The 4-bedroom, 3-bath, single-family home with an estimated value of more than $445,000 at that time had been on the market for more than 6 weeks. The purchasing price was not disclosed. 8 months later, the same investment outfit went on a buying spree in the Moscow neighborhood, shaken by the tragedy, purchasing 2 single-family homes and 1 multi-family property directly adjacent to the off-campus student rental where the killing took place. Each of the 3 homes located on King Road were bought out for an undisclosed sum, but data from Realtor.com indicates that the properties at 1118 King Road and 1126 King Road currently have estimated value of more than $610,000 and $484,000 respectively. Overall, Eagle Investment Group LLC's real estate portfolio in Moscow, a small farming community of 25,000 people, in addition to being the home of the University of Idaho, has no fewer than 15 different properties, including single family and multi-family homes, apartments, and triplexes, some of them purchased as far back as 2014. One of the properties, a multi-family home on West Taylor Street, is located just zero point 0.2 miles from the rental where the four students lived. It was not immediately clear when Eagle Investment Group bought that residence. Many questions remain about the new owner's intentions for the homes surrounding the site of the high-profile quadruple homicide. It is not uncommon for investors to buy up older homes clustered together and then raise them to make way for a new housing development. So, what do you think? Do you think that's the intention? I mean, did they, if obviously, if they were buying some properties there since 2014, and then when this murder took place, they said, okay, all these houses that are on the market, we're going to make them an offer because now, even though this didn't happen in their property, it's adjacent, and we could tell them, look, maybe nobody will. Maybe, remember, if you look at it, who would have thought that this rental house full of students and a guy had to fear from someone sneaking in and killing them all? So I'm sure that they approached whoever had the houses on the market, said, you know what? Do you feel safe? And nobody's going to want this place. And I don't know what they were serving. I don't know if those houses that they bought were already lived in by a single family or like this, they were being rented out, to students. But I'm sure they played on the fear of like this people don't consider this a safe place anymore, especially when four students can get killed inside a house. So maybe that is what they're planning to do. Who knows? But again, there's a far-reaching effect of um, of what happens with properties once they start. Like I said, depends. Like I said, if it's an old case, you really can't scare the neighbors or new residents like something's going to happen to you. Most of the time, it's going to be a pain in the neck if you live in a property where you have people coming by your house and looking. But something like this, where recently four students got killed, and if you look at this Kohlberger guy, this is not a big tough guy. Like this guy just snuck in, and I don't know. It's like anything is possible. So yeah, I'm sure they played up on the fears. As a matter of fact, let's go to this is a short little video that they had of uh, the what they call because believe it or not, when this happens, people pay attention because let's face it, everybody has a house. You could have something happen next door to you. It can happen. So here we go. This is here we go.
We're being hit. We're being hit. Oh my God, there's people outside.
Oh wait, hold on. This is not what I wanted. And by the way, personally, I hate it when I'm trying to watch something and they throw this other thing at me. It's like, come on, stop that. Here we go. And this, as you could tell, this is shortly after the crime was discovered. And there, it looks like they're dusting. This doesn't look so good when you. There go. Let me tell you something. That must have been a gruesome thing. I'm sure that by then maybe the bodies had been removed from this place. But that's a very, as you can tell, there's not really any, they didn't have really any audio in there. It just shows people walking around and,
We've been
hey,
hit. We've been hit. Oh my God,
oh,
there's people outside.
oh, I'm telling you, again, I hate it when they do these auto loops on videos that I have no interest in. Very bad. But anyway, as you can tell, that was at the very beginning, and then, of course, they went on to develop, you know, information. Because remember, everybody, I remember when this crime was discovered, everybody was like, who was able to do this? How and who? Goes to show you. And then again, you see this background on this person that he was giving off all these warning signs. And I understand somebody peculiar, eccentric, or even that just you can't be arresting people like that, but makes you wonder at some point. Yes, but if you've got a professor or somebody that's got to walk a student to their car, that's like, okay, what's wrong with this picture? But unfortunately, is I believe there's some of those Kohlbergers still running around. Okay, the next story that we're going to look at, this story, by the way, has been around, unfortunately, for many years. All right, this has to do with the murder of a little girl named JonBenet Ramsey. I'm going to interject this real quick. There's been a lot of criticism about how the investigation on the murder of this child was handled, and so many years later, what is it? I think 30 years. They still haven't found the perpetrator. And it's the other day somebody was making kind of like a indirect comparison to what's going on with the Guthrie investigation, like that you've got all these top dogs involved, and then the time goes by and time goes by and weeks and months and years, and the next thing you know, even though supposedly the best of the best from different types of law enforcement or investigative agencies are involved. So there you go. So let's and of course we're going to look here at what happened with the house where this happened. Remember again, this is a property where the murder was committed within its walls. All right. Early in the morning of December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey called 911 to report that her daughter, 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey, had been abducted from their Boulder, Colorado home. Patsy claimed to have found a handwritten ransom note on stationery from the house. It demanded payment of $118,000. Hours later, JonBenet Ramsey found his daughter's body in the basement. She was sexually assaulted, beaten, and garroted to death. JonBenet's parents were considered early suspects, but were never charged. Patsy died in 2006 from ovarian cancer. In 2008, she, along with her husband and son Burke Ramsey, were exonerated in the case. The Ramseys moved into the house 5 years before the crime. The home had close to 8,000 square feet spread across 3 stories. Well, it has it, it's still there. It's within walking distance of the University of Colorado Boulder campus. After JonBenet's death, her family never stayed overnight in the home again. They sold the property to investors for $650,000 in February 1998. From 1999 to 2001, E.J. Kreis, aka Doc Kreis, then a strength and conditioning coach for the University of Colorado, rented the home. In June 2001, the street address of the property was changed slightly and a large fence, gate, and tall trees were added to give the home more privacy. Tom Milner and Carol Schuler Milner, daughter of televangelist Robert H. Schuler, bought the home in May 2004 for $1.05 million. In July 2008, the Milners listed the property for $2.68 million, but took it off the market without selling. They listed the home again in May 2009, taking the price down to $2.29 million, and listed it once again in February 2011 for $2.3 million, but the house still didn't sell. The price was cut even more steeply in 2014 when it was listed for $1.98 million, but the Milners still didn't offload the house. Carol Milner said that part of the reason they didn't sell the house was that they didn't want to get let go of the property. Okay. Not that they didn't get interested buyers. The Milners then renovated the house and in November 2022 listed it for $7.25 million. In March 2023, the Milners cut the price to $6.95 million, reducing it further to $6.24 million 7 months later. As of March 2024, the house was pulled from the market once more without a buyer. The market perceives anything dealing with children who have been injured, abused, or murdered the most heinous condition. It has a dramatic effect on property values. Oral Anderson, a forensic real estate appraiser who assessed the property after the murder. He added that properties with dark pasts, especially involving children, are typically sold at 10% to 25% discounts, and sometimes for even cheaper if the crimes were particularly disturbing. Anderson also noted that the property may potentially attract unwanted attention from tourists who sometimes visit murder houses when they're on vacation. Of course. And see, that's what I was saying. Sometimes it's just a bother. But if you've got like a big estate where you've got a gate, somehow you can get around that. But when it comes times to selling, look at these last owners, the Milners. They've been trying to sell this thing, even though, of course, it's increased in price, probably because of its location, but still, no takers. No takers. And I think this is just me extrapolating. Beyond the stigma that you had a person, in this case a child, killed horribly, which at this point is the murder, the perpetrator has not been caught. All right, even with all the advances of DNA, that's how they exonerated the parents' little brother. They supposedly had found unknown male DNA. I think was the last thing, but they still haven't matched it to anybody. All right. Besides the fact that a crime of this nature was committed, everybody, I think, in the back of their mind thinks, okay, and if for those of you watching the video version of this, you could see there was a picture there of an open window and what looked like a suitcase, like somebody came in through the basement through an open window. Think about it. Most of us would never think that anybody would dare to come into your house and basically go in there and steal your child and kill her or you. What happened with the Idaho 4? Those were not children, they were basically young adults. And they were able to do it. And in this one, the parents were there. Okay. How many people? You're in the same house with your child and your child's in the room or in this. You're thinking, who would come into my house, take my daughter and kill her, sexually assault her and kill her? And I think that in the back of everybody's mind, it's almost like, wow, I live here and this is this beautiful house and it's got all this room and all this space, but somebody could come in here. What if somebody comes in here? It's not an impossible thing. We get into this, what they call normalcy bias, where we think, yeah, oh, that happens to the other guy. But always in the back of our mind, I think there's always that fear that, yeah, you might want to say, it couldn't happen to me. But I think that when buying these types of properties, there's always that lingering fear. It's like, you know what, I'll buy that house down the road. Might have the same size, maybe the same basement, the same thing, but that's where it's at. So, okay, next story. This is very famous. Well, there's actually two properties involved in this case. This is the O.J. Simpson case. All right. There was two properties where O.J. lived and where his dead wife lived. On the night of June 12, 1994, Simpson's ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman were found stabbed to death outside her apartment in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. There was a history of domestic violence between the couple before the murder. Nicole Brown Simpson experienced a prolonged and severe pattern of domestic violence throughout her relationship with O.J. Simpson, which began in 1977 when she was 18 and he was a married football star. The relationship, marked by control, jealousy, and physical abuse, escalated over the years. She documented 62 incidents of abuse in her diary, including being punched, kicked, choked, and threatened with a gun. In 1989, she called police after a violent episode where she was beaten so severely she required hospital treatment. Her face bruised, her lips cut, and her eye blackened. Despite this, Simpson pleaded no contest to spousal abuse, received probation, and avoided jail, which did not deter further abuse. After their 1992 divorce, Simpson continued to stalk and harass her, violating restraining orders and attempting to control her life. Nicole called a domestic violence helpline just 5 days before her murder, identifying herself only by her first name and describing her fear of her ex husband's violent tendencies. Experts and advocates now recognize her case as a textbook example of narcissistic abuse, where charm masked control and repeat abuse was normalized or minimized. Simpson was an immediate suspect, and police gathered enough evidence to file charges and take him into custody, but he failed to turn himself in. He was then involved in a low speed pursuit with patrol cars but was later arrested to face a trial. The famous 11-month trial came to a dramatic end as the jury found Simpson not guilty of the two murders and he was free to walk with no additional arrests or convictions related to the murder being made. In 1997, 2 years after he was found not guilty of two counts of murder, Simpson was unable to pay the mortgage on his home in Brentwood, California, and defaulted, possibly because he was ordered to pay $33.5 million to the Brown and Goldman families in February of 1997, following a civil court case. Simpson's life took on a turn for the worse, much, much worse. In fact, beyond his tarred reputation and a significant loss of wealth. In September 2007, Simpson attacked two men in a Las Vegas hotel room to claim back memorabilia he believed were stolen from his house. In 1995, he was charged with criminal conspiracy, kidnapping, assault, robbery, and using a deadly weapon. He was sentenced to 33 years with a 9-year minimum on October 3rd, 2008. His sentence was made on the same day he was acquitted of murder. By the way, I did not know this. I started looking in on this. Wow, right? Can you imagine? 13 years later, one day you're found on the one day you're acquitted, on the other one you're going to jail. 13 years before, Simpson only ended up serving the minimum term after being released following a parole hearing and also good behavior in prison. The Simpsons' home, which was over 6,000 square feet and purchased in 1977 for $650,000, housed the family for about 20 years. It was later purchased by a new owner for $4 million before it was subsequently demolished in 1998. The new owners proceeded to build a new house on the famous grounds, complete with privacy gate. That's another alternative that a lot of new owners take, which is like, we're not going to renovate it, we're going to raise it. That's nothing's going to be left. Now, O.J. Simpson died in April 2024, like a year and a half ago. Um, Nicole Brown Simpson's former residence, located at 879 South Bundy Drive in Brentwood, Los Angeles, was the site of her and Ronald Goldman's murder. The 3,400 square foot, 4 bedroom, 4 bathroom townhouse was originally purchased by Nicole in January 1994 for $625,000 under the address 875 South Bundy Drive. After the murders, the property remained vacant for over 2 years. It was first sold in 1997 for $525,000, then underwent significant renovations, including a new address, 1879 South Bundy Drive. That's very common, where they will change the address. They will change, like move the numbers over. re-landscaping, and the removal of the original tiled walkway and gate to obscure its grim history. The home was resold in 2006 for $1.72 million, and a new owner, Kenneth Abdallah, reportedly spent nearly $4 million on the property. The home has since been remodeled into a modern Mediterranean style estate with a tennis court and guest house. Despite the changes, the property remains a notable site for true crime enthusiasts. As of 2024, Zillow estimated its value at $2.6 million. The current owner is John Blanchard, a former real estate market analyst who resides at the property. So again, here we go back to, remember, this is a townhouse that you have to worry about um, people coming and looking through your, I guess, your gate, your property, and you think, oh, who does that? Plenty of people do that, by the way. Plenty of people. To you, and I'm talking about normies. Most normies is I'd be like, one thing is to go by and take a picture, but you would think, who's going to come up or even try to go into properties? Who would do that? There's plenty of people that do that. They have no boundaries. Like, yeah. So that's a problem. Yes, that is a problem, especially when you don't have like a big yard or an estate where you could say the gate's way out there, but my house is back here, and even then, it's a problem. So, and I think it's really weird because one of the owners of her house said he invested $4 million in it, but it's only worth a little over $2 million now in Brentwood. And sometimes you ask yourself, I think, hindsight's 2020 and everything, but it's almost like you would think that the easiest, safest thing would have been to move away from that area. Move away from that area. And of course, that always comes into play, like how much did his fame win him an easy deal when he was being accused of domestic violence, which it looks like was very obvious. This was not like, oh, we had a bad argument, and I'm saying he did. No, 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 no. This lady was being abused very badly. That you would think that somebody would have stepped in and said, "Hey, I don't care if you're a football player. I don't care who you are, OJ or anybody. Yeah, let's go. There's something going on with you." But hindsight's 2020, and now he's also pushing up daisies, and it's over and out. I just feel sorry for those children that lost their mom that way. And as a matter of fact, this is a little thing about the where they revisited the OJ case, and here we go.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
30 years ago, a verdict that polarized the world.
Guilty of the crime of murder.
O.J. Simpson acquitted of the double murder of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and Ronald Goldman.
What goes through your mind that it's been 3 decades since this verdict played out the way that it did?
The same thing that's always gone through my mind, the fact that 2 young people were brutally slaughtered and nobody paid the price.
Tom Lang was one of the lead detectives on the case. Now retired, he and witness for the prosecution, Cato Kalin, recently spoke to police officers in Seaside about some of the lessons learned and the possible missteps from the Simpson case, all a part of a speaker series hosted by Seaside Police. For Lang, the case never really closed. He co-wrote a book about it and has a long list of evidence against Simpson never presented at trial.
22 items in here that would put any one of you on death row that were not used as evidence against Simpson.
Included in that list, a witness, Jill Shrively, who Lang said saw Simpson driving his Bronco erratically with his lights off near the scene shortly after the murders. She was not asked to testify by prosecutor Marcia Clark.
She actually jotted down his license number, but she sold her story to the TV, and because of that excuse was used.
Lang also told the audience about another witness, Skip Junis, who said he saw O.J. at LAX putting items into a trash can before flying to Chicago the night of the murders. Prosecutors never used him either, later saying no one could corroborate his story. But now, in a new development, Lang says limo driver Alan Park saw it too.
He says, yeah, he says, I saw him standing there with that bag, you know, and putting stuff in the, I said, what? He said, yeah, I saw him. This is the limo driver. He said, I saw him as I was driving away. I saw him taking stuff out of the bag, putting it into the trash container, just like Judas. I said, well, why didn't you tell somebody? He says, well, I did. I said, I told Marcia.
We reached out to Marcia Clark. We are still waiting to hear back. Lang himself faced criticism too during the case. Some said he was too soft on Simpson during the initial questioning before he was charged. Lang says the tactic was deliberate, playing good cop so Simpson would let police photograph his injured finger.
And how did the intense public scrutiny at the time affect your ability to do your job?
You don't allow anything to affect your job. You're the cop. You do what the cop does. You can't do what the jury does. You can't be the prosecutor. You can't be the defense. You can't do what the judge does. You can't be the media. You're the cop.
Just a few years after the police beating of Rodney King and the LA riots, the Simpson case only further fueled mistrust in law enforcement. The trial was at the intersection of race, crime, sports, and entertainment, and it all played out on live TV.
Because it was televised, so everybody knew my face and my wherever I would go out at that time. Well, actually, it lasted a long time.
Cato Kalin was friends with Nicole and lived in OJ's guest house. He became a witness for the prosecution. His life changed overnight.
What was the hardest part of being thrust into the spotlight like that?
I guess it's people don't know who you are. They think of you as a soap opera character because that's what the trial was, sort of a soap opera to them.
Today, Kalin co-hosts a true crime podcast, but this was his first time talking to a live law enforcement audience, offering a rare look into the case, still drawing interest.
When I got this call, it's because Nick Borges, the chief of police at Seaside, would be watching the podcast that I was on. I was aware of this, and he loved the content and where I was coming with, and he started listening episode after episode, and it was like, Cato would make a great guest speaker for this.
This is probably the biggest case in American history as it relates to a murder case, and we want to be better. We want to learn from these things. We can learn from people who were there, who can educate and teach us to be better and better serve our community.
For police in Seaside, it's a chance to learn. For Lang and Kalin, it's a reminder that the verdict of the century still looms large, even 30 years later.
O.J. Simpson was acquitted of criminal charges but was later found liable for the wrongful deaths of Ron and Nicole in a civil trial. Simpson was ordered to pay more than $33 million to the families of the victims.
Simpson died in 2024, having only paid around $130,000, though. That's according to multiple reports.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant.
Okay. So there you go. I didn't know that. I didn't know that he had only paid, what, $150,000? Because I imagine probably, I have no idea, but maybe he spent a good portion of his money on his legal defense. And remember, also, it wasn't only then, it was when he went to prison in 2008. He probably had to fund that. He lived here in Florida. Why? Because they can't take away your homestead where you live at. So I know he had a home here in Florida for many years. As a matter of fact, I visited a house of neighbors, so totally unrelated, that lived across the street from him, where he lived here in Florida. So, and yeah, I wasn't aware that he had not. And I don't know if everybody recalls that at one time he was going to write a book. If I was going to do it, this is how I do it. I was like, man, that's stupid. And of course, I think that the intent was from the family, of the Goldman family and Nicole Brown Simpson's, like, if you ever make a nickel off of this, it's going to come to us. So, yeah. And again, that's both of those properties. Well, you know, some, like I said, end up being demolished because it's just easier to deal with it that way. And that's another thing. In the case of Nicole Simpson Brown, that town, she had not lived there that long, but it was the actual murder scene. The other one, the actual house where they lived at, they had lived there for a long time. They had occupied the house for a long time. You know, so, and sometimes, you want to err on the side of, and you have to ask yourself, would you buy a property like that? Now let's go to something much more recent. As a matter of fact, in a way, this case is still churning. It has not It hasn't finished. How's that? Because as a matter of fact, I was looking up, well, what's going on with this case because it seems like um, there's always something going on with it, and it's incredible because as this was the Murdaugh, the Murdaugh murder, how's that? And it seems that this, in other words, there was murder, but it was like everything under the sun was landed in the lap of this trial, of the murder trial. In other words, it wasn't just it became more than what it started out to be. And like everything else, it was like the perfect setting for a Southern Gothic kind of deal. Um, and of course, well, here we go. Now, on June 7th, 2021, Maggie Murdaugh and her son Paul were gunned down on their property on the outskirts of Islandton, South Carolina. In the months to come, the senseless crime sprouted more ugly heads than a hydra. Margaret Kennedy Brandstetter, aka Maggie, a graduate from the University of South Carolina and granddaughter of a barber, married Richard Alexander Murdaugh, a member of the state's most powerful legal family. They had two sons, Buster and Paul. Maggie favored staying at the family's 1,700-acre hunting lodge on Moselle Road outside the town of Hampton in South Carolina's Low Country. On June 7, 2021, Maggie Murdaugh and her son Paul, 22, were shot on the grounds of their property known as Cross Swamp Farm around 9 p.m. A double homicide in the rural town was surprising, but not as much as one would expect, since there were whispers the Murdaughs, who were part of the community for over a century, had a history of tragic deaths. It seemed that secrets and sins had come home to roost. The Murdaughs served as prosecutors and civil attorneys since 1910 for the Low Country's 5 counties in the 14th Circuit, which are Beaufort, Jasper, Hampton, Allendale, and Culleton. They lived in the rural town of Hampton, where there is a lack of chain stores. Charleston was 65 miles away, or is 65 miles away, from the law firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Fitzroth, and Dietrich. Paul Murdaugh was troubled, and when he died, he had a trial. Paul, by the way, is their son. Was troubled, and when he died, he had a trial hanging over his head for a felony boat driving charge in connection to a 2019 incident where a 19-year-old woman, Mallory Beach, was killed. He was one of 6 underage people who bought alcohol with fake IDs. They went boating to an oyster roast on Pocky Island. Anthony Cook, Paul's childhood friend and Mallory's boyfriend, testified that Paul had argued with his girlfriend and slapped her. Soon after, he hit a barge piling on Archer Creek, and 6 of them were thrown into the water. 5 of them made it to shore. Mallory did not. Her body was recovered a week later. However, Paul's unusual behavior preceded this event. A family member said that when he was around 11, he told his Aunt Nancy to go F herself. He was known even then for not handling authority well. Maggie spoiled her sons, especially Paul, whose personality hinted at the troubles he would incur when he was older. She was a homemaker who involved herself in all aspects of her children's life. Later, Paul's uncles would deny the family used its legal ties to protect him from the incident. There were accusations they had stopped Paul from being tested for his alcohol level. It's been reported that among Paul's friends, it was known he had a drinking problem, when an alter ego called Timmy would emerge. This version, which had been around since 2015, was deranged and dangerous. He was known for shedding his clothes down to his boxer shorts. His friends learned when to recognize that Timmy was about to show up and it was time to leave. The family at the time of Paul's death was facing a civil suit placed by Mallory's mother. The family had just settled another civil suit involving the wrongful death of Gloria Satterfield, their housekeeper, who died as a result of a trip and fall in February 2018 in their home. According to legal reports, while she was inside the Murdaugh's Hampton home, their dogs caused her to trip and fall down a flight of stairs, which resulted in her sustaining a brain injury. The claim was settled for $500,000. Documents showed that her death was not reported to the coroner and an autopsy was not performed. She lingered approximately 20 days before she passed. Eventually, a document was found where it was signed by a judge affirming a total settlement of $4.3 million paid for Gloria's death. Alex Murdaugh did not pass this money on to Gloria's family. According to a resident of Hampton, the only one in the whole family to go see Gloria when she was dying in the hospital was Maggie Murdaugh. She had worked for the Murdaughs for more than 20 years. The Murdaughs, who were usually on the other side of the law, found themselves in a precarious situation. Now they were being investigated in the murder of two of the family members. Alex Murdaugh's alibi was easy to verify. He said he was visiting a hospital where his father, Randolph Murdaugh III, lay dying. He passed away on June 10th, 3 days after the shooting. Despite the police looking initially at possible suspects close to home, there was no manhunt for a suspect. Optics being everything, by June 17th, two brothers of Alex Murdaugh appeared on Good Morning America asking for the public's help in finding the perpetrator. Within a day of their appearance, police started to dredge swampland close to the lodge and a tip line was set up. It seemed that Paul Murdaugh had been getting threats prior to the shooting. Apparently the family didn't think they were credible. Paul's paternal uncles claimed the victims had no known enemies. There were several that could have been motivated by revenge: former employees, people they had sued or prosecuted, or a person with their own axe to grind. Two possible suspects who had good reason to want revenge were the parents of Mallory Beach or the mother of Stephen Smith. On July 8, 2015, Stephen Smith, 19, a gay man from Hampton, was found dead on a rural road. His skull was crushed and his shoulder was dislocated. His mother, Sandy, age 55, said she had been fighting since then to find out what happened to her son. The New York Post reviewed the police file of the case, and it reflects where South Carolina Highway Patrol received at least one anonymous tip connecting a member of the Murdaugh family to the Stephen Smith case. No one in the family was charged or considered a formal suspect in the case. The case was reopened in 2021 after police discovered new information while investigating Maggie and Paul's killings. There's nothing like a murder case to air out a family's dirty laundry, no matter how well connected they are. Sources familiar with the family claim that Alex and Maggie were living separate lives when she died. She would stay in their cottage in Edisto Beach and he was at the hunting lodge in Islandton. Within 3 months of the murders, Alex Murdaugh was sued by his family's law firm after he confessed to siphoning millions through a fraudulent bank account. The firm also alerted law enforcement that Alex Murdaugh had admitted to hiring someone to shoot him in a suicide plot so his son Buster could receive a payout from a $10 million life insurance policy. The man named was Curtis Smith, aka Fast Eddie Smith, age 61, who was Alex Murdaugh's longtime drug supplier. He also happened to be a distant cousin and former client. The plot resulted with a bullet only grazing Murdaugh's head. An unidentified couple told the 911 dispatcher, "We are on Salcatchee Road, and there's a male on the side of the road with blood all over him, and he's waving his hands. He looks fine, but it kind of looks like a setup, so we didn't stop." Murdaugh told 911, "I got a flat tire, and I stopped, and somebody stopped to help me. And when I turned my back, they tried to shoot me." When asked if he'd been shot, he said, "Yes, but I mean, I'm okay. I can't drive, and I'm bleeding a lot." Asked where he was wounded, Murdaugh replied, "I'm not sure, somewhere on my head." In June 2022, Murdaugh and Smith were indicted on conspiracy and drug charges. It's alleged that Smith received 437 checks totaling $2,413,754 from Murdaugh between 2013 to 2021. Smith would convert them into cash to benefit Murdaugh. Alex Murdaugh was freed on a $20,000 bail and entered a rehab center to treat his opioid addiction, which he suffered from for 20 years. Upon his release from the center in October 2021, he was taken into custody on 2 felony counts related to the mysterious death of Gloria Satterfield. In July 2022, he was arrested for the murder of his wife and son. He was allegedly tied to the crime via blood splatter on his clothing, along with a video that placed him at the murder scene. He was disbarred in South Carolina. In September 2022, two men connected to the Walterboro Cowboys, a street gang, were dragged into the Murdaugh murder mystery. According to one of the gang members, Alex Murdaugh runs half the drugs in this county. In August 2022, the grand jury indicted two local men, Cowboy Jerry Rivers, aka Cousins Rivers, age 39, and Spencer Anwan Roberts, 34, on charges that possibly involved being part of Murdaugh's drug and money laundering operation in the Low Country. In July 2025, Roberts pled guilty to distributing drugs and money laundering. He was sentenced to 6 years. Roberts is the man who was accused of supplying Murdaugh with different medications, including oxycodone. He was selling the oxy pills for about $60 each. Alex Murdaugh faced a total of 90 charges of financial wrongdoing that included drug distribution and money laundering across several counties. The operation was bigger than anyone suspected. Local criminal groups close to I-95, which were used as a conduit for gun running and drugs from Miami to New York, were part of the distribution ring. Members of the Cowboys claimed authorities wanted to drag in the gang into the case to muddy the water. There was even a theory based on information posted on the Web Sleuth forum after the murder of Paul and Maggie that Murdaugh had a longtime friendship with Barrett T. Bulwer, a fisherman based out of Beaufort. He was arrested in 1980 along with his father on drug smuggling charges, where 15 tons of marijuana were seized on a shrimp boat in the Bahamas. The charges were dropped in 1983 after a key government witness was killed when he stepped in front of a car in Florida. The state newspaper reported at the time. Bulwer, who died in 2018, sold the hunting lodge on Moselle Road to Murdaugh in 2009. Bulwer co-owns several odd and out-of-the-way properties along the waterways of St. Helena Island, which would be ideal for smuggling. Access to the islands was only possible by boat. Alex Murdaugh pled not guilty in July 2022 ahead of his trial, which was slated for January 2023. In October 2022, new court filings pointed the finger at Curtis Fast Eddie Smith as the person who murdered Maggie Murdaugh and Paul Murdaugh. Smith failed a polygraph test when asked about the crime. Smith's attorney says he has an ironclad alibi for when the crime was committed. In March 2023, Alex Murdaugh, now 54, was convicted of murdering his son and wife. He was also found guilty of 2 counts of possession of a weapon in the commission of a crime. The jury came to a unanimous decision after 3 hours of deliberation. He was sentenced to 2 life terms with an appeal pending. A decision was made to exhume Stephen Smith, who was found dead in 2015, not far from the Murdaugh property. The ME concluded he died from a hit and run. His mother has raised funds for an independent autopsy. In May 2023, Murdaugh came clean about what exactly happened with Gloria Satterfield, and Nautilus Insurance sued Murdaugh for committing life insurance fraud. The truth was that no dogs were involved, and the Satterfield family was owed $4.3 million. According to the South Carolina Attorney General's office, Murdaugh had been indicted on 3 counts of money laundering, 3 counts of computer crimes, and 5 counts of obtaining signature or property by false pretenses in connection to the Satterfield case. Nautilus Insurance Company paid the settlement, and since this disclosure have sued Murdaugh for committing life insurance fraud. In August 2023, Corey Fleming was sentenced to 46 months in prison for helping Murdaugh steal the money from the Satterfield family. Fleming was the godfather to Murdaugh's son, and they were once roommates when they attended law school. Fleming was hired by the Satterfield family to sue Murdaugh in order to collect the insurance money. He said he didn't believe that Murdaugh would keep all the money, just that he would skim about $100,000 from the funds. Earlier in the month, Russell Lafitte, a former Hampton banker, was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison and paid nearly $3.6 million in restitution to cover the money his family's bank and Murdaugh's former law firm put up to make the victims whole. According to the South Carolina Attorney General's office, Murdaugh has been indicted or was indicted on 3 counts of money laundering, 3 counts of computer crimes, and you heard all of that. Murdaugh faced 100 charges from financial crimes he committed when he was working as a lawyer. In September 2023, Murdaugh lost privileges after he violated prison policy when he provided information to be delivered to a media outlet for an interview. Jim Griffin, Murdaugh's attorney, was accused of helping his client record the interview for the docuseries The Fall of the House of Murdaugh. The prison where Murdaugh is serving his sentence has been kept a secret. He is currently serving 2 life sentences for killing his wife and his son. Now, while this is all going on, his property in March of 2023, which included the house and 1,770 acres around it, were bought by auction by James Eyre and Jeffrey Godley, who divided up the acreage and put up the house with the 21 acres on the market. It languished on the market until it went up for auction. In October 2024, the Murdaugh murder house was bought by businessman Alexander Wallace Blair, who paid $1 million for the 21-acre estate. The murder house was extensively renovated inside and out by the new owner. He purchased it as a second home for his family before choosing to try to sell it himself, listing it for the sky-high price of $2.75 million in December 2024. Now, again, this is all going on. This is what I'm saying. This case has got so many things going on. In January 2025, okay, he asked for a new trial. Okay, he appealed. He went, and they agreed. The South Carolina Supreme Court agreed to hear his appeal. And he based the appeal on allegations of jury tampering by Rebecca Hill, which was the former Colleton County clerk of the court. And basically that jury misconduct can undermine the integrity of the judicial process. She was released on a $30,000 bond. So apparently they arrested her. They must have found something there that they arrested her. Now, this is what are the allegations against her? 1, that she told the jurors not to trust Murdaugh's testimony. 2, that she told jurors to speed up the verdict. Oh boy. 3, that she used the case to promote herself and a book she wrote about the trial. I'm telling you. Now, obviously, that's why I think they granted him the appeal, because they substantiated what they were arguing. And basically what would happen was, would he get a new trial? Then in July 2025, we're talking less than a year ago, text messages between Alex Murdaugh and drug dealer Curtis Eddie Smith were discovered. And the defense attorneys claim this information could have altered their trial strategy, including calling Smith to the stand. Smith has not been prosecuted, despite what the defense attorney has described as evidence suggesting he was one of the largest OxyContin distributors in South Carolina. There's an ongoing appeal for jury tampering, which is still going on, that we talked about, based on the behavior of Becky Smith. All right. She was arrested and charged with obstructing justice and misconduct. And she was also charged with perjury after allegedly lying to the state Supreme Court Justice Jean told jury 2024 proceedings. According to the warrant, Hill did not tell the truth during a previous trial concerning potential jury tampering for the 2023 Murdaugh trial. She told Toll she had not shown sealed evidence to third parties. Holy crap! So she lied, and then she lied some more. And let's keep going. Hill also used her position to promote Behind the Doors of Justice, the Murdaugh Murders, which she co-authored. She received money for personal use from Title IV incentive funds and the Colleton County Clerk of Court office. When Alex Murdaugh's trial commenced in 2021, his grandfather's portrait was removed from the South Carolina courtroom. Randolph Buster Murdaugh was the 14th Circuit solicitor. The Murdaugh served in the 14th Circuit from 1920 to 2006, almost 100 years. Alex Murdaugh's great-grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh Sr., died on July 19, 1940, when his auto mysteriously stopped on a railroad crossing in the middle of the night. The train engineer testified the car stopped just before crossing the tracks, then at the last moment lurched forward into the path of the locomotive. He had outlived both of his wives, Etta and Estelle. Etta had died from a case of puerperal sepsis, which occurred after childbirth or miscarriage. She was only 29 years old. She is Alex Murdaugh's great-grandmother. Estelle Murdaugh died at the age of 45 of an unknown illness that left her bedridden for 5 months. Interestingly, Randolph was buried next to his first wife, Etta, and Estelle was buried in a separate cemetery in Varnville. Randolph Murdaugh Sr.'s death was ruled accidental, even though rumors swirled of suicide or alcohol playing a role. His son filed a wrongful death suit against the railroad, which was settled out of court. Buster Murdaugh followed in his father's footsteps and served as solicitor from 1940 to 1986. His son Randolph, in turn, served from 1986 to 2006. So they've been used to suing. They sue everything that moves. Okay, last update. This has to do with the property. In February 2026, today, present, the murder house has been taken off the market only 5 months after being relisted for $2.2 million. Blair, the last owner, removed it off the market in April 2025, and he kept it off until September. Instead of being listed as a family home, the description changed to a farm, and the price had lowered to $2.2 million. On February 21st, 2026, the listing was removed. This was less than 2 weeks after Murdaugh's lawyers argued before the South Carolina Supreme Court that his conviction should be overturned since he was not given a fair trial. If this conviction is overturned, he still has to serve 40 years for federal financial crimes. In October 2024, Blair, present owner of the farm, spoke to Realtor.com about his reasonings for purchasing the home. Quote, he insists that he believes Murdaugh is innocent of the murders of his wife and son, while revealing that despite reports to the contrary, his portion of the property did include the kennels where his son Paul was shot. A crime scene expert determined Murdaugh ambushed Paul in the dog kennels and shot him twice, then shot his wife 5 times, delivering the final shots after she fell to her knees. However, Blair claimed that could not have been the case, revealing that he was actually in possession of the kennel door and window that contained the bullet holes, which he said served as clear evidence of Murdaugh's innocence. I have the door and the window from the dog kennel, he said. Murdaugh is a big man. He was even bigger back then, and he's too big for the bullets to have gone through in the way that they did. Maybe it was karma for other things that he did, he went on, but I don't think he killed them. Reports initially suggested that the dog kennels had not been included in the 21-acre portion of the Murdaugh family estate that he purchased. However, Blair says that the kennels, as well as the Murdaugh's private airplane hangar, were both part of the sale. He tore down both structures while renovating the home. He added that while he didn't know Murdaugh personally, many of the locals who live on the street where the Moselle Estate house sits agreed with him that the former lawyer is not guilty of the murders. Blair stated he hoped, end quote, Blair stated he hopes the renovation will remove any bad stigma from the property. In place of the hangar and kennel, he added a new airplane hangar and a barn. Okay, so let me tell you something. He might not have he may not have, let's say, even the murders. But God, that man he was a one-way crime wave. He was a one-person crime wave, honestly. But let's see, hold on. Let's see if we can, let's see if we can get this over here. And if we can get this going. And we're talking, this is from Realtor.com, which has
$1 million. That's $500,000 off its original asking price. The current owner, Alex Blair, originally purchased the property at auction for $1 million in February of 2024. He exclusively told Realtor.com at the time that he purchased the property because he didn't think Murdaugh did it. Blair spent months overhauling the estate, including tearing down the dog kennels, and then briefly listing Moselle before taking it down in April 2025, only to relist it with the huge price cut. No word on what led to that price cut or the new listing. The sprawling low-country property has more than 5,000 square feet, including 4 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms, including a new primary suite. A quarter-mile driveway lined with oak trees leads to the 2-story plantation-style home. The gourmet kitchen has high-end appliances, and the bathrooms are spa-style. The grounds feature 10 acres of fenced horse pastures, including 2 barns and trails. The listing says it's ideal for equestrian enthusiasts. What the listing doesn't mention, Moselle was the scene of a double homicide on June 7th, 2021, when Murdaugh's wife Maggie and their 22-year-old son Paul were shot to death near the dog kennels. That sparked a media frenzy and the unraveling of one of South Carolina's most prominent legal dynasties. Murdaugh, once powerful personal injury attorney, was convicted in March of 2023 for 2 counts of first-degree murder and weapons charges. He's currently serving 2 life sentences while appealing the verdict. Now, separately, Murdaugh pleaded guilty to financial crimes, including the theft of millions of dollars from his client. For that, he received a 40-year sentence.
So there we go. All right, there we go. So what do you think? Do you think he? It's considering all the crimes that he's, drug lord, drug runner, oxycontin, you name it. It's almost ironic that he would be convicted of killing his wife and his son, and he didn't do it. That maybe he hired somebody to do it. Yeah, could be. But of all the things, and I guess because of all the crimes he committed, I can imagine that for that jury, it would not be a stretch to think. And I don't know the minutia of that trial that they presented the evidence against him, but just based on if I'm sitting on that jury and I'm learning all these things that this man has done besides the murder part, I'd be like, okay, this is not like a straight and narrow guy that I'm like, man, that's hard to believe this guy's gonna kill his son and his wife, especially his son. Think about it. I know sometimes marriages go bitter, but you're killing your own child. And and if you go by what they're saying, you're making arrangements to leave your other son a $10 million payoff. Then in the background of all of this, you get this flavor that there was something going on with his family. Even back then, his great grandfather, it sounds like he purposely put his car in front of a locomotive knowing it couldn't stop. And of course, as powerful they were back in the 1940s, of course, that goes without saying. It was just like, oh, his car stalled out. And and they turn around, they sue the railroad company, which again, we don't know how that works because, hey, if you pull in front of a locomotive, you're going to lose. The car's going to lose. Was there alcohol? Was there mental health problems? This guy, he's got 20 years of dependency on OxyContin, among other things. Plus being, I guess he hooked up with the local gangs, like, and this other thing about this other gentleman that had owned all these little islands right there off the coast, perfect for running drugs. I mean, this, and then I'm going to ask the same. I'm going to do that because I'm a woman. At what point do you say, I, I'm 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 one of these people that I believe that you should try to keep your marriage, but not like this. If you're living with somebody, you have 2 children, and you're aware that this you cannot not know. Think about it. If he has an OxyContin habit for 20 years, that would be a good portion of, you know, around the age of his kids. So for the majority of the marriage, I would say his wife had to be aware that there was something going on with him as far as an addiction, whatever comes with it. That there's a point that you say, "No, I'm out of here." It makes you wonder why would someone stay? I mean, you think about it, money. If she divorced him, she could. I'm sure that she would get some type of alimony and taking care of her kids. And same thing. There's a point where you say, "This is dangerous. This is crazy." And even if, let's say, you're thinking, "I want to help my spouse. I want to help them. I don't want to abandon them. I think they have a problem, and I want to try to help them." There comes a point where you realize I, I can't help them, or they don't want my help, or something along those lines, especially if you have children. There you go. And now you have a son who's left, basically. And it's really funny because and that's another thing. I don't know. What do you guys think? When this is all coming up, his family lawyer, partnership, they all run to disown him. And I'm thinking to myself, his brothers, you're telling me none of you guys suspected? Nobody? Nobody thought like, hey, nobody had like a whiff that this guy was involved. Forget the murder part. I'm talking about drug running, uh, laundering money, hooked up with gangs, I guess, that were doing the distribution for him. Nobody there in that law firm thought, but they distanced themselves very, very quickly. And unfortunately, look what happened with his son. Girl gets killed. He slaps his girlfriend. Bad sign. And that thing. When I was looking at that, I was like, this is trouble with a capital T. When your kid, all right, gets drunk and an alternate personality comes out that his friends call Timmy. And basically what it said is when Timmy shows up, it's time to get out of Dodge. When your own friends are saying that, what does that tell you? That that was, like I said, trouble with a capital T. So again, what do you guys think? You think he really killed them? Did he ask somebody to kill them? Or maybe not. Did somebody set him up? That he was guilty of this other stuff? Absolutely. Like they said, even if he gets a new trial or it's overturned, he's not going anywhere. He's still got so much other things, federal crimes that he's got to do time for that is not going anywhere fast. The only thing I could think of, I was looking, is that maybe because, like they said, where his prison is unknown. That the only thing I could think of that they're trying is that my understanding is that federal prisons are a little bit better than regular prison or state prison. Then we come right circle back to the property. 1,700 acres divvied up. I don't need, they don't mention what's happened with the acreage around it. All right, which I'm sure that's not the same thing, but the actual land, 21 acres, by the way, that's very inexpensive. Well, he bought it for $1 million at auction. Okay, that's nothing for 21 acres. And now it's like he's removed it recently. He removed it off the market. All right. One of two things. Usually that it's like, in other words, it gets to the point where when you list a property and it sits there for so long, it kind of like doesn't help it any, because other people look and say, "Wow, that thing's been on the market for this amount. What's wrong?" That's number one. Or number two, he's doing to sale through private parties. Like that's it. The next thing you hear is, "Hey, somebody bought it," but it's not being handled, separately. I don't know. And I think it's very interesting that the guy that's there saying, "Hey, he didn't shoot it. I have the door and I have this," and I guess the angle of how the bullets were, maybe from his vantage point that he's tall. I don't know. And it's surprising to learn, according to this gentleman that's there, that the neighbors don't think he did it. Interesting. Yeah. So anyway, guys, I hope you liked this last episode of Stories of the Supernatural. All right. Again, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the future, mm, some of these properties, they eventually will have some type of, maybe, it depends, of paranormal events attached to them. I think people, depends on their, how could you call it? It depends on what they end up doing with the property, or sometimes time has to go by where sometimes information leaks out about unusual things happening. And again, for anybody that's done paranormal research, you can renovate a house, or you can, knock down walls, put in new walls. If something's happening there, it's going to happen. It's going to happen no matter what. So, sign up for my newsletter on Substack. Go to mppellicer.com. I've got links to everything, everywhere, whether it's the video versions of any of the episodes of any of the series or the MP3 files. Or if not, of course, you can find me on all the major podcast platforms. Look for my Stories of the Supernatural, MP Pellicer. You're going to find me. I'm on all the major ones. And again, but if you don't want to listen with commercial interruption, go to my website, Till next time, you are all wonderful, and thank you for spending this time with me. Take care.